Hello there. Today I want to do a second channel video that's talking about a problem that I continuously have with working on my vintage computers, and that is how I maintain the supplementary resources for them. I'm going to preface this by saying I want to edit this video as little as possible because I am doing this the second day after Christmas and kind of just want to spitball for a little bit here as I go over something that's just been kind of like a dull buzzing problem for a while. So what you're looking at here is the main drive set array thing for how I store and organize my vintage computer files. Now, to maintain and use the very wide variety of vintage computers I have to maintain just folders and so many files and software and manuals and things. It gets really ridiculous. But organizing that has been a bit of a challenge. Now, I'm going to say that these are not just things that I have archived. This is what I'm going to call working set of files. I really need to break this out into things that I have personally archived and what the working set is. So let's say I get a new printer and the manual's already been scanned by BitSavers. I'm just going to download that manual and put it in this set so that I don't have to scan it or something, and everything is just always in one location so that I know where everything is. But the problem is that I don't know where everything is because this had the highest ambitions when it started out, but has just devolved over time. So let's start out by looking at some particular examples of what kinds of problems there are. So first off, I want to mention that software and hardware are split, but only sort of. This is the worst part of this, and I want to rectify this. So my whole goal for this today, by the way, is to come up with a different means of organizing everything. But first, I want to show you why this is a problem. So let's just drill down into hardware first. We can see a bunch of categories of hardware that I'm going to call classes, let's say. But that's not important right now because what's most important is this folder called Systems. This was kind of a workaround catch-all for computers that don't necessarily fit into other categories, and then it turns out I just put everything into this because this kind of made more sense in my initial organization and was a workaround. So if we go into HP from here, we can see a whole bunch of resources related to HP computers, and then we have, let's say, Series 80. Actually, I think we want to do the 98, where even is Series 200? This is it. Okay. So from here, we have under Computers, Hardware, Systems, HP, Series 200, we finally have access to, say, tools for working with the computer. We have software for the computer that's sorted out in different ways and stuff. This is okay, but this doesn't work well for everything. So let's take a look at some of the actual hardware I have so that I can go over what kinds of problems I'm facing with how all of this gets organized and used. So I'm going to go through some examples. Most of this is going to be HP, not because I have a large collection of HP stuff, although I do, but because HP is a good example of a wide variety of things that are complicated. So let's start out with this. This is an HP Series 80 computer that is the HP 85. Now the HP 85 and the HP 86 here are very similar, but there is one key difference. The 86 is an 80 column display and the 85 is a 40 column display. This means that not all software is compatible with both computers. You can write a basic program in it, and as long as you don't try to maintain a particular column width, it's fine. It can run on both, but not always. So in this example, this is an HP games program collection thing, and this is specifically set up for 40 column displays. So it only works in the 85. The 86 has the 80 column display. It can show it, but it would only be in the upper left and not always, because if they don't use like a carriage return or something and just expect the character overflow to handle the line wrapping, it doesn't work. And this works both ways because here we have some software like say VisiCalc, which is meant for 80 column displays, and that cannot be used on the HP 85. This doesn't work like the Osborne, by the way, where it'll just allow you to scroll the larger display. No, it just wraps it. It doesn't do anything. So even though these two computers are architecturally the same, functionally compatible with each other, can run each other's programs. Like, you can put this in the HP86 and it will run. It doesn't know any better, but the software doesn't actually work. So the HP85 needs its own software separated out from the HP86, which means that but this is the other thing, we can have software that can run on both. So let me just come over to here and start talking about some of the horrors that are going on with this. So let's say we have HP Computer Series 80. We have software that can run on both of these, but then we have software that would run on each of them individually. So the way that I'm thinking this could be handled is that we have 3 potential classifications for how to sort this stuff. We can do vendor first, which would be this. We can have class first, which is essentially how I started. Or we can have system first, which is how I've kind of been handling this up until recently. So let me go over how this would work with the different hardware examples that we have here, which is kind of how I should have started this. But again, I don't really want to edit this. Anyway, so that's what the HP85 stuff would look like. But this gets a little more complicated. Here's the HP Series 200 or 9836C. This was retroactively renamed to the Series 200 to fit more in line with this stuff. Why they didn't just name it that from the beginning, I don't know. Anyway, this computer is completely incompatible with these computers, but is peripheral compatible, which adds all sorts of other problems. But one of the things that's really complicated about this is that we'll have something like this. This is an RS-232 serial interface card for this computer. It is, however, only usable with this computer, although it might actually be workable with the Series 300 computers, but I don't have one of those, and we're just going to pretend that that does not exist right now. So this card is effectively only usable for this machine. So the way I'm thinking that this could work in, let's say, the vendor layout is we would have HP Computer Series 200 and then an interface class where we could put this interface card, because if we want to change some settings on this or something, we have to crack it open and move the jumpers around. So I'm going to need documentation on how to use this thing, and I need to know where to find this documentation. So that would be one example. Then we have this. This was a screenshot from my video on the computer, but specifically about the touchpad thing here, the drawing pad, that's it. But I want to focus on the printer. This printer is just GPIB. The interface is fairly generic, could be plugged into a Commodore PET, a PC, or the HP Series 80's computers. But in all practical purposes, no one would ever use it with anything except for this machine, because it's intended to sit on top, and it's enormous and mostly hollow because, again, it's just meant to sit on top of this computer. So it's kind of in a weird spot. But that's not the end of the printer weirdness. Let's take a look at this. This is a TRS-80 line printer. This just happened to be the only generic printer that I have documented on my wiki right now. So this printer has an LPT interface. It is, however, branded TRS-80, so it seems like it should go with, say, the TRS-80 Model 1. But really, it can go with any computer. So even though this is a TRS-80 Radio Shack product, it's not really that special. So this just gets more and more of a mess. Let's talk about another thing. This is an IBM PS2 Model 30. I think. I don't remember. The model numbers are dumb, and I don't have a wiki page for this computer yet. This is an IBM PS2 computer. It's kind of PC compatible. It's got the MCA slots and other weird nonsense, but if you have like DOS on a 3.5-inch floppy, it'll boot it. However, it is not completely software compatible with everything, because this has a BIOS configuration boot disk. That means that there is a software disk for this computer that is completely unique, not compatible with anything else that you put into here so that you can configure the BIOS. I also have the Compaq 386 plasma display, that portable that was sent to me. It has a very similar thing going on. So even in IBM PC computer land, you're going to have software that is very specific to particular hardware devices, which is one of the reasons why I want to integrate software into the hardware thing, because it just makes sense. There's going to have to be software in there anyway. And that doesn't even count things like, say, this Creative Sound Blaster card, which is just going to have a driver disk to make it work. Creative is also another good example of a company kind of like HP, where you can't really pin them down to one thing, because Creative made sound cards, they also made speakers, they also made CD drives, they also made keyboards, they probably made game controllers. Like, there's a whole bunch of things that they were involved in, and you can't just like pin them down to one thing. So, the last thing I want to talk about is Doom. Now, I'm going to take a moment here to grind an axe here. For some reason, posting "Can it run Doom" has become a thing in YouTube comments, and I just want to take a moment to point out that you are all wrong. It's "Can it run Crysis," not "Can it run Doom." It is a misnomer from the concept that Doom has been ported to everything, that you even are thinking of Doom running on weird hardware. But the question is, can it run Crysis? And I'm only disappointed in that because I haven't seen anyone comment, "Can it run Crysis?" in a long time, and I miss it. That's a good one. Doom, not so much, because you all keep asking it on things that obviously can't run Crysis. Like, or can't run Doom. See, like, it doesn't even register to me. Anyway, they obviously can't run Doom. Like a teletype. Like, it's not even a computer. It's like, can a monitor run it? Come on. You can do better. You can meme better. Anyway, Doom here is a problem because this is not made for any specific computer. It is made for IBM PC compatibles, which means that it is kind of generic, and that's where this really gets to become a mess. So let's switch over to here and look at the options for how we can organize this stuff. By the way, Doom is an example of why software was initially a separate folder, but I want to integrate it into hardware, and this becomes the most difficult thing. Okay, so let's start out. Vendor first as a organizational classification, okay? So we have HP, we have computers, we have Series 80, we have 85, we have 86, and each of those gets their own software with different hierarchies, so that we know shared software goes here, and that's how it would work. Now, we would also have things like manuals for different things or tools that go into these folders. This is just a general overview of some of the biggest pain points here. Now, we would have the Series 200. It would have its own software. We'd have 9836C. There is some software that is unique to this computer because the 9826C is a 40-column, again, display, kind of like the 85 versus the 86, but it's also monochrome. And the 9836 non-C is another monochrome-only computer. So there are color programs that they might actually be able to run on the monochrome computers, but they wouldn't look right. So there would be software for that is unique. And then we have, under the Series 200 system, the interface card that allows us to connect serial devices. This is important, as you'll see later. Then we have the part that kills this for me, but we'll get back to that in a moment. Under HP, I also have categories for printers. We have that thermal printer that is realistically only usable with the Series 200, but, you know, if we're sorting it by hardware manufacturers, it makes sense to just have it under here as its own generic thing. Then we have the HP ThinkJet. This is one of those ones where this is kind of a pain in the butt. So the HPIB version of the ThinkJet is functional with all of these computers, okay? So we could put it in computer, but it wouldn't be compatible with these computers. So that's weird. The HP IL one is compatible only with their calculators. So that's kind of horrible. But if we organize this by hardware class, it kind of makes sense to just dump all of these in here. Also, LPT and RS-232 peripherals kind of are exactly the same, but more on that later. Then we have storage, the HP 9122C. Now, this is where this gets weird and difficult to classify. This is a CS80 GPIB HPIB interface floppy drive. Technically, this is meant to be used with the HP 86. Actually, it's realistically meant to be used with the HP 150, which is an MS-DOS-ish compatible computer. But it also works with the Series 200, and I think it might work with the Series 80. The Series 80 was around when Amigo was the standard protocol. By the way, CS80, that is the software protocol for the HP drives. CS80 and Amigo are two different versions. CS80 is faster and better, but anyway, this is why this is horrible. So this machine, or this floppy drive, which is an external floppy drive, is compatible with all of this. Not really compatible with this, although you could use it if you hated yourself, and almost certainly not compatible with that, although it probably is because they're weird. Like, you can run Unix on this, but then they have like later Unix machines that it definitely would not be compatible with. So I'm throwing this in there for other stuff in a moment. Then we have the test gear, okay? So HP made a lot of test gear. This is for the 16500B logic analysis mainframe system. Okay. Why do we need a logic analyzer in here? Well, because this machine has a 3.5-inch floppy drive that uses LIF formatted, thanks phone, LIF formatted floppy disks, which are the same as what all of these computers use. If you wanted to exfiltrate data from this, you would need to use these, or have a modern computer and modern software that can do it, but let's just ignore that. It's intended, well, this is intended to be used with these. So it kind of makes sense to just lump all this together. And I would really like to do some more stuff with vintage computers and vintage test equipment, so I kind of want to keep it all together here. Plus, another thing is it all just kind of goes together. Anyway, there's a lot of cross-referencing here, as we'll see as we go on. Then I want to get to one last thing. Under HP, we could say we have an interface card for SCSI. That makes sense, right? Well, this is a SCSI UDMA 320, whatever, Ultra 320, SCSI 3, wide, however you want to think about it, card. This is actually an LSI rebranded card, but it is firmware locked to only work with a handful of HP compatible devices. So in effect, it might as well be made by HP. The thing is, though, this is a PCIe card, so it could work with an IBM PC computer, or it could work with a Unix computer. Now, I don't know that HP actually made any Unix machines that were PCIe, but let's just pretend this is PCI, and boom, now this is true. So, where should this go? I've put it over here as a device that's just interface for HP, which for now works, but as you'll see later, it doesn't really work. Okay, now let's talk about this. This is an HP Pavilion laptop that ran Windows Vista. So it will have some driver software, maybe the recovery disks or something. But this is kind of an oddball, but it is a machine made by HP. So for this classification of vendor first, it would go in here. But here's the question. Where does Doom go in this classification? Because we would also have a IBM PC category for, say, the 5150. Doom shouldn't go in there, so we would have to have somewhere else that software could go, or have a weird generic category. I don't know, we'll get back to that concept in a moment. But the problem with this organizing method is Doom can't fit anywhere in here. The only computer in this that Doom could run on is this machine, where we could put a software category but under IBM PC, but why would we put that under HP? That doesn't make sense. So let's go on to the next category of class first. Now, let's keep in mind that this is essentially what I already did. So we go to hardware, and then we have this. So I have arcade, which is where the Hydro Thunders are. I have Bluetooth, which is where I put some of the Bluetooth driver stacks for like Windows XP. Under capture, we have my capture cards. Under graphics, I'll have 3DFX cards. It's another video card. More video card here is for a VR headset, which realistically should have been under 3D VR, but you can see how this kind of works. Under plotter, we'll have some stuff for this stuff, but should this be under HP? See, this is where this becomes kind of a nightmare. Anyway, so let's say we do class first, like this, which is the one that I want to move away from, so clearly this isn't going to work. We could have computer. Okay, but then we have a problem, because IBM PC is a classification for computers, but Series 80 wouldn't really be great because there are like 4 computers that you would consider an HP Series 80, and almost all of them are incompatible with each other. The one that I'm leaving out here is the HP 87, which is an 80 column wide display, but it's narrower, so it's kind of like the Dot, if you saw that video, where the display is widescreen but then short, and it's like super weird and has the least amount of software available. The 86 is also available in A and B variants that have different peripherals that are compatible with them, so it's all fun. But anyway, under this, we have the same problem of where Doom goes, because we have computers, but then we would have IBM PC, which we could say is a classification, but we have it under HP right now. We could flip this and then have IBM PC HP for the Pavilion, but then where would we put the CS or the Series 80 and the Series 200? That gets a little complicated. Under class first, we would have printer, HP, and then all of these printers. But again, we have the problem down here, which you can see, where we would have storage, HP, and then the floppy drive that's only compatible with these machines. That's kind of dumb. That should probably just be up here, shouldn't it? Because you would never think, oh, I have, a compact portable, I need a floppy drive. And then you go into storage and you see this, and that's just useless. You can't, they don't do anything. It's not compatible. Then we would have test gear, and I'm kind of okay with this being broken out like this. And then we have interface. And this is where I feel like this starts to get to the point where it's a little more complicated. So we would have interface, SCSI. I feel like that works. Although over here, I think I just have SCSI as its own thing entirely. And then we could have HP as a brand of SCSI provider, which in this particular case, I think would be very preferable because it's kind of a nightmare. But should we do this up here where it's interface and then series or system is like this and then brand, or like this is a little messy. Here is an example of why this is kind of a pain in the butt, though. Under sound, we would have, say, the Apple IIgs stereo card and an AW64 gold card. Neither of those are even remotely related to each other functionally. Having those two be beside each other doesn't really help. It would make a lot more sense to have the 2GS card be next to, say, 2GS information. And the AW64 card, well, that's a whole other problem that we'll get to down here. So here is what I think maybe makes the most sense for organizing, but this one is also imperfect. So we're going to organize this by system, and I start this out by having a vendor. Because HP made a lot of computers that are only specific to HP things. And if we go back over to here and go to the system folder, which is similar to the concept that I'm proposing over here, we see a similar thing. We have Apple, we have Apple II, Xserve, which, like, meh. Then we have Atari, where we have the ST, and then we have Commodore, where we would have the PET, and it's like weird computer. HP would have the Series 200, the Series 80, and then I think I have a logic analyzer in here, but just pretend that's not a thing for right now. But even this is imperfect, because we'll have something like CPM, where CPM is kind of a system type, because all of these machines are architecturally very similar, but software-wise, they're all incompatible. So this classification is a little weird. Now, this might make sense because you could have your Jonos here where you have your individual software disks like that. And then you could have your Kpro where you have your individual software disks. But I don't know. Like, maybe this is the best way, but I don't know. So back over here, we have HP as a vendor. Okay. But, it messed up my tabbing for this. Let's go back to the root doc here. So we would have, this is the same thing, by the way. It's just, for some reason, Ocular messed up the indentation. So under system, we would have HP, and then we would have computers. We have HP Series 80, Series 200 with their respective softwares. But then if there was something that was shared between, say, these, thankfully there isn't, we could put them in a subcategory, because I'm kind of allowing for subsystems and generic, which I'll get to in a second. HP has their like PA RISC kind of like weird hardware that runs HP UX, which is like its own custom flavor of Unix. I could see that kind of stuff being unique, so I'm thinking that could go there. But you'll notice the HP Pavilion is gone because I have moved that down to here under IBM PC. So any driver disks for a particular PC computer, or maybe say that IBM PS2 that has the BIOS configuration disk, that could go in here. So the BIOS disk would be under a computer, IBM model 35 or whatever, and then the software, But similar thing, HP Pavilion, the driver disk that went with that laptop would go there. And critically, Doom could go under a software folder for IBM PC. That works, okay? Now, some things that suck. Under HP, we would have storage as a classification, and then we could have that floppy drive there. I feel like that's better than the alternative of having it under this category, but it's still not ideal, but maybe better. I think if we have systems as a thing here, we need to have a generic option. So something like that TRS-80 line printer here isn't technically compatible with any particular computer. It is compatible with the LPT interface, which is an IEEE standard. We could even call this category IEEE. All right. So under printer HP, we could have LPT and RS-232, but you'll notice that I did pull out the other printer, which I put here under HP because it's essentially only ever going to be used with that. Under interface, we have HP SCSI for this thing, even though that should maybe be up here. This is where this just gets messy. It's kind of a pain in the butt. But then we have a generic test gear interface. Now, here's where this also gets messy. The reason I have generic is because if we didn't have this, we would probably just lump everything here into the IBM PC category, which doesn't feel particularly fair because then everything just goes into the IBM PC category. But then we have some edge cases, and this is also terrible. This is why this is so hard, okay? HP basic card. You know what? I think I have this in here. HP basic. No. HP. I guess I don't have it in here. Okay, so I have a card, okay, that is effectively this computer on a single card, okay? Oh, I do have it here. Okay. This is the HP Basic Language Processor card. This is a Motorola 68K right there. We have some RAM over here. We have a GPIB interface controller right here. We have peripheral expansions there. This card is literally the HP Series 200 technical computer on an ISA card. This was shipped in HP Vectra PCs to make them functional as technical computers in labs and stuff to be used with test equipment. But it's literally this whole computer on a card. So the way that it works is you load a TSR and DOS, and then you can mount like disk images to the card in order to get software into it. But that means it is very difficult to classify because it was only sold in HP Vectras as far as I can tell. It was never offered as a standalone card. So should that be under an HP Vectra, or should it be an ISA card under generic, or should it be because it's compatible with anything, or should it be under HP? So that basic card could go under HP, and then maybe like, I don't know, system on a card folder here, and then basic language processor, but it could also go under generic system on a card processor. Because like another thing, where would oh my gosh, brain, Trackstar E go, the Apple II on a card? Would that go under Apple? Because it doesn't, that's not made by Apple. That's made by, I think, Diamond, actually. So that's a completely different brand. So it wouldn't go under Diamond, because I wouldn't make a Diamond category for that, because Diamond didn't make actual computers, so they have no systems. So that would be under generic for ISA stuff. And then we would have the system on a card category here, but then we would have the system on a card category up here. So this is where this gets messy. So either that card would go under an HP Vectra machine, but that's actually a PC and goes in here, or it could go under generic, but it's HP and it's mostly the same stuff as this. This cross-referencing between things is why this becomes a nightmare. And we will actually see this again multiple times. This is what all of the problems are, essentially. So the computer device is DOT, okay? It's an IBM, well, I was correct in that it is an MS-DOS compatible machine, but it's also kind of not. So that was the computer that has 3.5-inch floppy drives and was the first PC to have that, or IBM compatible-ish machine. But you could never go and find, thanks phone, 3.5-inch software sold on a floppy disk, put it in that computer and be able to use it, because computer devices had to create their own format, their own file system layout on the floppy disks to be able to do that because they were first. IBM hadn't even done it yet, so they had nothing to clone. So that means that it's not really compatible with any software. Getting software onto it is still a problem that I haven't solved, actually. That's why I haven't done a follow-up, but also because I haven't been able to find belts for that machine because it's kind of a nightmare. But anyway, that's a different problem. So even though it's an IBM-compatible computer, you can't get software onto it. So do I count this as a separate system that has its own software ecosystem? Because there was more software made for that computer that Computer Devices sold, but the whole point was that it was IBM compatible when it wasn't. So it's kind of weird. If you could get an IBM executable onto a disk for it, it will work. But getting it onto that disk is a nightmare. So this one is in a very weird spot. Then we have another problem. Okay. x86 compatible computers, okay? The longer you look at that classification of systems, the more difficult it becomes to say whether or not something will work on it. So let's go with just probably the most recent thing, okay? 64-bit versus 32-bit. So if you took a modern executable for like Windows 11 nowadays and tried to run it on Windows 98, it's definitely not going to work. Even ignoring, I should say, all of the APIs that are different, the executable just won't run because it's not a 64-bit processor that you would have in a Windows 98 computer. So that's one difference. But when you are looking at like boxed software, the biggest problem that you'll have is whether or not something is meant for DOS or meant for Windows. Now, a lot of DOS programs can run on Windows, but no Windows programs can run on DOS. And it's not always true that you can run DOS stuff on Windows. You would not have a fun time trying to run Test Drive 3 in a Windows environment. Even on a machine that would be able to run Windows, if you rebooted into DOS, it would still probably suck because that game runs without a frame rate limiter. Then we have another problem, Linux. Linux runs on x86 computers, but also anything else. And you could have software that is pre-compiled for x86 Linux computers, like I showed on the Linspire PC that was from Fry's Electronics recently, where I had a game, Theocracy, that had a pre-compiled x86 Linux binary on it. But that means that a Linux game, if we classify a computer as being IBM compatible, it would go under the same category as the 5150 and say this Windows Vista Pavilion laptop, but out of the box, it wouldn't run on any of those. So this is where this whole system starts to break down, and why initially software was broken out over here, because under software, I tried to break this out by DOS, CP/M, Linux, Mac, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. This is where this gets difficult. So that's where I'm at with this. I'm not currently looking. Let me say this. I don't have a current plan to start reorganizing my computer backups, but I'm curious to know what other people do, because this is easily one of the most difficult things to maintain when you have a large fleet of vintage computers. And I think that this system-based method with a concession for generic for x86 hardware or something, I don't know, maybe software should go into generic, but then that's no different than having a software folder. Well, that's the thing. Software can't go into generic. It has to go under, because you can have, oh my gosh, this is awful. Apple, okay, you'd have Apple II, you would have Apple II GS, you would have Lisa, you'd have Mac XL, you'd have PowerPC, then you'd have System 9, you'd have OS X. There's so many layers of incompatible software in just Apple land. So yeah, we would definitely need an Apple system category, and then all of those would get listed in there, and then we would have manuals and drivers and things, but also software for that. So yeah, generic, I think generic could never have software in it. Or maybe Linux would go in there. I don't know. This is where this gets difficult. So anyway, I would say I could attempt to model this after existing solutions like BitSavers, but I think BitSavers, I don't mean this in any kind of criticizing way. I think BitSavers is an evolved layout like my stuff is over here, where not everything follows a rigid structure, and sometimes that's just for the best. So like with the HP stuff over here, we're gonna have HPs, and then we're gonna have systems like these. Technically should be top level, but there's not that many computers that fall into these, and I feel like breaking it out into HP would make more sense. So it's just like it's all about finding the compromises for how to do this. So anyway, YouTube comments aren't the best way to describe this kind of stuff. So I don't know how people could relay this information, but I would be curious to know how other people who have ridiculously big collections of computers handle this kind of thing, because there's so much incompatible software that just has to be handled, and you need documentation, like the data general stuff. Okay, when I was working on the data generals, I ended up making a dedicated folder and shortcut for all of this stuff. Okay, so under here we have docs. So some of this is stuff that I scanned. Some of this I downloaded from BitSavers or Wild Hair Computing. Then we have the emulators, okay, and then I just have some generic photos of things that I have and took pictures of for documentation while I was here. But all of this is not really well organized because the Micronova and the Nova 4X are functionally separate. The peripherals are not compatible with each other. The software isn't compatible between them. So even in something like that, we're going to start to fragment down. So, and it's only because I've only worked on the Micronova so far that I have that, but I haven't broken everything out. So it's a mess. Anyway, that's enough ranting. I just wanted to do a little video here because this got stuck in my head this morning, and I was like, I wonder how other people handle this and how I could improve my own setup. So I think switching to a system-based with some concessions for like really small systems, like that's the thing. Over here, would I have dot under IBM PC, or would I have a separate dot category for one computer? That just feels ridiculous. I don't know. Anyway, how do you guys handle it? I would be curious to know. I should wrap this up here because I'm just going to ramble because this feels like a problem that can't be solved. So hopefully you found that at least intriguing to see what kind of problems you have when you get to this kind of scale. It's stupid. But yeah. Thank you all for watching. I would love to know how anyone else solves this, and I'll see you next time.